Anyways, so welcome to Wine and Wisdom, Parshat Behar Bechukotai. This week, in this week's Torah portion, we're going to read two portions, as we have been doing recently, in order to make up for the fact that we only had one other this year. So a lot of these double portions would be split into two separate parshas. If this was a leap year and we needed more parshas, we would need 4 extra parshas throughout the year. And the title of tonight's class is Tear This Wall Down or Build This Wall. The only wall that lasts is not a wall at all. And first of all, before we get started, let me say L'chaim. For those of you that are drinking wine, can make the blessing together with me. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Borei Peri Hagafen.
And could he be loud?
I'm drinking some Baron Herzog Chardonnay 2018. Nothing fancy this week. Actually, this week we're going to read from the Recanti. And that was the wine that I was drinking last week. For those of you that remember, there was a wine named after that rabbi. I don't know why the Jewish wine companies have taken to naming their wines after famous Jewish scholars. I think some of them must have been wine connoisseurs or wine producers, etc. In any event, so this week's Parsha is Behar Bechukotai. We always like to start off with a brief overview of the Parsha. I know that many of you, most of you, if not all of you, know the Parsha. You're familiar with most of the details. In this week's Torah portion, we start off with Shemitah. So Shemitah is the sabbatical year program. That's where every 7 years in agricultural Israel, of ancient Israel, they would leave the land to rest. As a matter of fact, many of those laws still apply today, but since they only apply in the land of Israel, many of us are not familiar with them. I will tell you that one of the results of this business is some interesting flipping things on their head. Whereas normally we know wherever you travel in the world, if you'd like to keep kosher, stick to fruits and vegetables and you're good.
Right.
Israel, it's actually the opposite. Particularly in a year of Shemitah, in a sabbatical year, fruits and vegetables are the most complicated thing to be kosher, because you got to make sure that whoever they're coming from was counting the years and knows what year the produce came in, etc. Another interesting thing that comes from Shemitah, as well as, by the way, from Truma and Meiser, which are other agricultural laws with regards to the land of Israel, is that we're always talking down, the BDS movement. The anti-Semites that want to destroy Israel economically by encouraging people to boycott, divest, and sanction Israel. And while I obviously encourage you to buy produce from Israel, I will say that if you're in Trader Joe's or in Ralph's, as I have been occasionally, and you do buy some peppers or some, I think peppers is the only thing that I've ever seen here, but probably oranges would be similar, and they come from the land of Israel, don't just pop them into your mouth. You can shoot me a text message and I can give you instructions as to what you have to do. There's a little bit of it that would have to be separated, etc. There's a process how we do that, even in today's day and age. So those laws of Shemitah are at the beginning of this week's Parsha.
I have a question, Rabbi. One question.
Yes, Ellen.
You buy produce from Israel, like an orange or whatever it is, isn't it problematic if the farmer doesn't do the proper tithing?
That's exactly what I was just saying. So it's problematic, but it's solvable. There is a solution.
It is solvable. Okay, that's what I was getting at. Okay.
In our siddur, there's a particular prayer that you're supposed to say, and you read that and you put aside that fruit or vegetable. We could talk about it. If anybody ever has this issue, please shoot me a text message.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Behar of this week's Torah also talks about the laws of the Jubilee year, the 50-year cycle. And as part of that comes the topic of our conversation today, which we'll dive right into, which is the laws of sale, the sale of real estate, and how that works in terms of Jewish law. For those of you that were at the course, Judaism's Gifts to the World, which I gave, was it in February? I think it was in February and March. You will recognize some of these laws from the Jubilee. But I do want to give one other interesting introduction to tonight's class before we dive into it. And by the way, tonight's class is not sponsored. If anybody would like to jump on board, you're welcome to do so. The other introduction is, very often we give a class, about the weekly portion, about a story that's recorded in the Parsha, about a law, a mitzvah. This week, it's not about a law, it's not about a mitzvah, It's not about a paragraph, even a sentence or a word. Our conversation today is going to revolve around one single letter in the Torah. If you can believe that or not. And I want you to think about that. Obviously, we always come to this class with an agenda of trying to walk away with a powerful life lesson. And we're gonna embark on this fascinating journey, and we're gonna discover how a single letter can actually really change our lives. There's a lot of meaning packed in even to this particular letter. And while it may take a lifetime or even beyond to do that to the entire Torah, but this exercise should remind us that we have a heritage that is so rich and so deep and so life-enhancing that we would be sorry to let it go. With that introduction, let's dive right into it. Marilyn, you want to start us off by reading for us text 1a?
The land shall not be sold permanently, for the land belongs to me, for you are strangers and temporary residents with me. Therefore, throughout the land of your possession, you shall give redemption for the land. If your brother becomes destitute and sells some of his inherited property, his redeemer, who is related to him, shall come forth and redeem his brother's sale. And if a man does not have a redeemer, but he gains enough means to afford its redemption, he shall calculate the years for which the land has been sold and return the remainder to the man to whom he sold it. And then he may return to his inheritance.
So, this week's Torah portion, as we said, we learned about the Jubilee year. Every sale in the land of Israel, all of us know that property, right? A house, a field, in English is called real estate.
Right.
And I don't think we have to think very far to recognize why it would be called real estate. What's real about it? What's real about it is that property is something that we acquire and we have for the rest of our lives, right? It's something that we spend 30 years, 20 years, 50 years, whatever it is, paying off a mortgage. And we hope that at the end of that time, we actually own the property, right? Another thing, which is, by the way, I think it was in French I saw, that real estate is actually called immobile. In other words, that it doesn't move. Real estate is yours. Once you buy it, it's yours, right? In the Torah, everything gets turned on its head. No such thing. From the time that Joshua helped the Jewish people, led the Jewish people in their conquest of the land of Israel, and they then subsequently settled the land of Israel. From that point forward, they started a 50-year count. And every 50 years, after 49 years, the 50th year, all land would return to its original owner. What does that mean? So the land was originally divided by the tribes. And this law is designed to keep, obviously we're soon going to talk about lots of reasons why this Jubilee year exists, but this law was designed to keep property within the tribes. So let's say I was from the tribe of Reuven, and yes, I was destitute, so I had to sell some of my property. I owned property, and I owned it because it was mine from my father and from his father, etc., all the way back to the times of Joshua. But now I have to sell it because I need ready cash for whatever reason. So now, says the Torah, you can sell it, but your real estate price should be more of a rental or a lease. And that lease price should be based on the 49 years, the 50-year cycle. You have to say hi? Okay, say hi, everybody.
Hi, Menachem, sweetie.
Hi, Menachem.
Can you say hi, Kalman? No, Menachem, please no touching the
That's a herd name.
Hi, Andrea. Say hi, Stephanie. Say hi, Alan. Say hi, Margaret. No touching. Okay. Say bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye, Menachem.
He's telling you all that he's going to take a bath.
That was very good.
You might have missed that nugget of information. I'm sorry we didn't get to everybody. We've got quite a few people on the call today, and it will take some time.
I definitely feel left out.
Here, Arnold, I'll say hi to you. Hi, Arnold.
Thank you, Rabbi.
I'm always here for you. Anyways, so this law is designed that if you're going to sell property, you don't sell it.
I can see somebody's feet over there.
So we don't sell it, based on a price that you're going to get it forever. It wasn't mortgages. I'm sure there were mortgages and things like that. But the idea was you sell it for 26 years because that's how many years there are left until the Jubilee year, right? Or you sell it for 16 years because that's how many years there are left until the Jubilee year, et cetera, et cetera. So says the Torah, that's how property sale works in the Torah. Okay. Reasons for this we could talk about. I'll give a brief explanation. One of the reasons given for this was in order that to kind of equalize the playing field. Instead of this ruthless process where the poor get poorer, then they need to sell their property and now they have no source of income. The Torah says we don't allow you to sell your property forever. You cannot sell your property forever. You cannot sell your property permanently. Your property has to be sold temporarily. We're not letting you do more. And then if you need to sell it again after the Jubilee year, you're welcome to do so. But at some point, the property should come back to your family like that. Your family should be able to have a proper social standing again. There is, however, one exception to this rule. Marilyn, you were reading for us, right? That was text 1a. A couple of verses later, text 1b, we have the walled city exception. Go ahead.
And when a man sells a residential house in a walled city, its redemption may take place until the completion of the year of its sale. Its period of redemption shall be a full year. But if it is not redeemed by the end of a complete year, then that house which is in the city that has a wall shall remain permanently the property of the one who purchased it throughout his generations. It will not leave his possession in the Jubilee.
Very interesting, right?
Yeah.
If this property exists, if this piece of real estate is in a walled city, then everything changes. What happens? He's got 1 year to buy it back, to redeem it back to himself. If not, then that sale is permanent. You can imagine how this would have affected the real estate prices, whether you lived in a walled city or you didn't live in a walled city, right? In Manhattan, many of you know I was previously a rabbi on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, and everybody knows on the Upper East Side or on the Upper West Side. So if your building is facing the park, then the price of the real estate goes up because you're facing the park, right? So imagine back in ancient Israel, if you had a piece of property that was in a walled city, it had a very different, property value than if it was not in a walled city. Now, I mentioned before in this class that today we follow the Shulchan Aruch, which is the Jewish code of law. But the Jewish code of law is flawed in that it does not cover all of the laws that there are in the Torah. It only covers, I say it's flawed, but really that's also its biggest blessing, that we don't have to go through all of the laws. The Shulchan Aruch is only supposed to be the laws that apply in today's day and age. It doesn't talk about laws that don't apply in today's day and age. So where do we go if we want to see this in a legal perspective? So the latest codifier, or latest, most prominent codifier, who put together all of the laws of the Torah into what he calls the Mishnah Torah, is the Rambam. Kalman, you want to read for us? Text 2 is the Rambam, or Maimonides, Moshe ben Maimon, as he explains these laws. Obviously, we excerpted some sections in order to give you readability and the whole idea in one sitting. Go ahead.
Jubilee, can I ask you to make it a tad larger?
Sure, absolutely. Always happy to.
Okay, that's good. In the Jubilee, servants are released and land is released. This refers to the laws regarding the sale of land in the Torah. This is a positive commandment, as the verse states, you shall grant redemption to the land. Portions of the land of Israel that were divided among the tribes can never be sold permanently. As the verse states, the land will not be sold in perpetuity. And if one sells the land in perpetuity, both the buyer and the seller violate a negative commandment. Their deeds are of no consequence, and the land reverts to its original owner in the Jubilee year. A person who sells a house in a city surrounded by a wall may redeem it throughout a 12-month period from the...
Just turn the page for you there. There you go. From the day
he sold it, whenever he desires, even on the day he sold it. And if 12 months pass and it is not redeemed, it is established as the property of the purchaser. When a person sells a house in a walled city and the Jubilee arrives within the first year after the sale, then the house does not revert to its owner in the Jubilee. Instead, it remains in the possession of the purchaser until the seller decides to redeem it during the year after its sale. Otherwise, after the year is completed, it becomes established as the property of the purchaser.
So the Jubilee year not only does not apply to property in a walled city. But even if it happens to be that this sale is happening after 49 and a half years into the cycle, and now in half a year from now is going to be the Jubilee year, it will not revert. He's got this interesting 12-month period, right? Like a return period for, like, you know, I just bought something from Apple and I returned it with a 14-day window. You know, you got a 12-month window to return this property. In other words, the opposite, to buy back your own property. If not, then it says forever. Jubilee year ahin, Jubilee year aher, like they say in English. Doesn't make a difference what's going on. Now, this is extremely strange. No matter what your reason is, because the commentary differ and they give lots of different explanations for the Jubilee year, no matter which way you look at it, why would you have an exception for sitting in a walled city? That doesn't make sense, right? What's so holy, pardon the expression, about what's so fancy about a wall, right? Why would that change all of the laws? So let's dive right into the commentary. Arnold, you want to read for us? The first one is from the Chinuch, who we've discussed at length. Very, very often, he's one of the counters of the mitzvos. So he's explaining mitzvah 341, which is this particular mitzvah. Go for it.
The reasons for the differences between the walled city and the regular land. The notion that houses in a walled city could never be reclaimed after a year is intended to promote the appeal of the land of Israel, to encourage the seller to quickly redeem it.
Okay, so he says, you know, people might not have the proper respect for the land of Israel, and they might be like, oh, I'll just sell it, who cares, whatever. So he says this law is designed to give people, like, you got this 12-month window. You want it, you want it. If you don't want it, you don't want it. You know, so it should give them like this kind of feeling that I want to keep land in the land of Israel. This is interesting. First of all, it does beg why, particularly for cities in a walled city, and we'll see some of the commentary later, and maybe you could kind of combine them. But this is his reason. Let's move on to text 4. Yosef Ilan, you want to read for us? This is the Chizkuni. So the Chizkuni is a biblical commentary. He's particularly a commentary on, hold on, let me just let Fischl in. Welcome, Fischl. He's particularly a commentator based on Rashi. So there are many commentaries that have been written throughout the years that base their commentary on the Torah off Rashi's, you know, line of thought, and then they kind of try to explain Rashi and ask on Rashi and clarify Rashi, etc. So let's see what he has to say. Go for it, Yosef Ilan.
Okay. Inasmuch as the city is walled, it is most likely that the earth of a walled city is usually not conducive for planting. Only regarding land upon which one's livelihood is dependent did God decree that it shall not return to the Jubilee, that it shall be returned by the Jubilee year, so as not to remove one's source of income. Oh, that's interesting.
This ties right into the point we made before about not wanting anybody to fall socially behind, right? For those of you that are familiar with the Greco-Roman history, and those two brothers, I forget their name, but they led a rebellion. They wanted to redistribute the land in ancient Rome, and the elites kind of quashed the rebellion. They really didn't want that to happen. The Jubilee year really works against that. It really allows for everybody to always own property. There's never like a certain social elite status you have because you're from the treasured few that own property, which is what it became later on in Greco-Roman times. In any event,
do the people in the Jubilee year, do they have to buy back their property, or
no? They do not have to buy it back. As we mentioned, the prices to begin with would be based on how many years there was left of the Jubilee year. So if there was only 1 year left of the Jubilee year, it would be treated more as a rental. You're going to rent this property for me for 1 year. Even if there might be an agreement, by the way, that after the Jubilee year, maybe he's going to redo the purchase, there's no halachic obligation for him there's no legal obligation for him to actually do so. Does that make sense? So all prices would be based on how many years was left of the Jubilee year.
Are these laws still in effect in Israel?
They are not. They are not for various reasons. Possibly that's a sad fact. I would say with this, it's probably a better idea. If we're not going to be following the whole Torah model, I'm not sure we should be following only one element of it. For starters, we would need to have a bet din that would enforce these things. We would need to have a Jewish court of law that would enforce these kind of things, a Sanhedrin, etc. There are many things that are missing, even in the modern state of Israel. Which we're very thankful that Jews live in Israel, that Jews can be safe in Israel. But there's many, since the modern state of Israel is a secular state and is unfortunately not a Torah-run state. So many of these laws don't apply. Go ahead, Yosef Ilan. So you were reading for us. So he said, so
reason.
why is this prerequisite important? Meaning, if it's a financial law, so why would it not apply in a walled city? Go ahead.
Another reason, usually when one purchases a home in a walled city, it is with the intent of remaining permanently. And of course, one does not fully settle in someone else's house, nor does he renovate it. Therefore, such a home does not return to by the Jubilee. But in the case of fields and homes in open cities, which people tend to lease and not necessarily buy, the Torah states that they are returned in the Jubilee year.
Okay, so he mentions two reasons. Reason number one, he says this is a financial law. And this is a financial law. It's directly dependent on the fact that property gives a person income. So property giving a person income only applies, at least in ancient agricultural Israel, to you owning a property that can yield fruit, that can yield produce, that can yield something to give you a livelihood, not property that you're going to live on. And therefore, if a property is in a walled city, which is always meant to live on, so then that would be reason number one why it wouldn't apply. He says number two, he says when you buy property in a walled city, he says there's a sense of permanence. There's a sense of I'm going to live here and this is where I'm going to lay down my roots. And people would never do that if they didn't intend to live there forever, and that's why I related to this point very much. You see, I'm renting now. I'm renting a condo. Right. While we do, every once in a while, we'll invest $20, $30 here, $20, $30 there, a new light fixture, a new whatever, this, that. We don't really invest in the property. I don't look at this as my property. It's where I'm living temporarily. Even if that temporarily ends up being 10 years by Hashem's providence, it doesn't make a difference. I'm only living here temporarily. I would never renovate it, right? So if we want people to be able to actually live in homes and feel like they bought a home that they can actually renovate, that they can settle in, etc., which is presumably what somebody buying a home or a property in a walled city is going to do, then we have to give them that ability to own it forever. Okay? Yeah. All right. Lots of interesting reasons. I'm going to open up for conversation in just a moment, but let's do text 5. Stephanie, you want to read for us? This is another commentator. By the way, this is a commentator we're going to talk about a little bit at tomorrow night. For those who are joining us tomorrow night at the beginning of the course, Judaism Decoded, the Or Sameach was a rabbi who lived in the city of Dvinsk, the same city where the Rogatchover lived. For those who didn't know, the Rogatchover Gaon, or the Sion, I think they call him, or the scholar of Rogatchover, of the city of Rogatchover. They both are buried in Dvinsk. The Or Sameach, who preceded the Rogatchover, was a very famous rabbi. He has a commentary on the Torah, and this is why we're going to mention him in tomorrow night's course. One of his main attempts is to kind of connect and show how the written law and the oral law, the written Torah and the oral Torah are one and the same. They go together, they go hand in hand. They're not two separate bodies of text. And additionally, there's an interesting episode that happened throughout his life. He was the rabbi in the city of Dvinsk, and he was offered the position of being rabbi in Jerusalem. This was in the 1900s, and he turned it down. Could be even the rabbi of Israel, I don't remember. And he turned it down because he wanted to stay with his people in the city of Dvinsk. He wanted to stay with his community. This episode reminds me of the Rebbe, who was asked very often why he didn't make Aliyah, why he didn't go up and reside in the land of Israel. The Rebbe very often said the captain is the last one to leave the ship. The Jews, if they ask for, need him. In any event, Stephanie, let's hear what the Or Sameach has to say. Go for it.
Walled cities are cities that are used to protect from enemies. It's where citizens of the country brace if there is a siege. If the law would be that a home is walled city would return to in the Jubilee year, over the course of 50 years, it is possible that numerous homes will be sold. Then in the Jubilee year, many former owners will return to their estates, and the cities will thus be filled with strangers who are unaware of the ins and outs of the city. They will not be a cohesive and unified front as they are not acquainted with each other, and they will not be able to support the city. Hence, the Torah gives only 1 year for the home to be returned. Otherwise, it is to be sold forever. Can we
And that's
really?
that's
own
actually it. Those last two lines are formatted wrong. They're supposed to be a question for discussion. So this is the end of the words Be'or Sameach. And what does he say? He says, this is really also just a practical piece of advice. I mean, not a practical piece of advice, but a practical solution to a defensive mechanism, right? Jews have always, for time immemorial, have needed to worry about our defensive system. And walled cities were obviously very much a part of that. You want to make sure that you're properly defended. So the Or Sameach points out that you want to have people of a city working together and knowing the city better than the enemy. If you constantly have strangers coming into a city, right? So you have new people buying houses, but they're leaving 5 years later, and then other people are coming back, and their children are coming, and it's like lots of strangers going around the city. They don't really know the city.
They can't
For those that have at times lived in tourist areas, in very heavy tourist areas, like if you've lived in Venice, Italy, or if you've lived in, like these kind of places, where most of the city is tourists, right? There's very little working together. Like everybody there doesn't really, like you ask somebody in the street for directions, they can't tell you where to go because you're asking them and the person next to you is a tourist, right? That's not what we want to be in our fortified cities. The cities that are fortified, that are supposed to provide our protection, we want them to, A, operate as a cohesive unit. They should know each other. And B, they should know the ins and outs of the city better than anyone else, excuse me.
Right.
So this is a little bit of the explanation as to why we have the Jubilee Year law, why it doesn't apply to walled cities. All right, fine. We can really sit here and go through lots of commentary on this topic, and it's actually a fascinating journey to do. But we'd like to move on towards a very important point. So the message that the Torah seems to be sending us, and for this we're going directly back to the text from this week's Torah portion. Why can we never sell land permanently? Kili haaretz, because the land belongs to me. So it turns out that real estate is actually not very real at all compared to Torah law. Torah wants to drive home the message that actually you don't own property, right? We always think real estate is the one thing that's actually mine. This can of seltzer is mine now, it won't be mine soon. I sell it, I buy it, whatever it is. All these little items, these physical items that we're constantly moving around our lives, those are not real. But real estate is actually ours. Hashem says, let's remember, Kili haaretz. The land belongs to me. Nothing really ever belongs to you. You have this temporary existence in this world in order for you to be able to do your mission here, etc. Okay, so it seems like the Torah is sending us a very strong message, which is you never really own land in this world. Okay, let's move on to section 2. I promised you that we would not be talking about a paragraph, we would not be talking about a sentence or a word, but rather we'd be focused on a letter. Remember that verse? We have it here again in text 1b. We're not going to read it again. The im lo yigael, right? If it is not written at the end of a complete year, then it goes back to it's a complete sale. The sale is a complete sale. This is with regards to the property that's in a walled city, and it stays by the new owner for eternity. Let's take a look here. What's going on here? V'kam habayit asher ba'ir. For those of you who know Hebrew, I'm doing this for those of you who know Hebrew. The house that is in the city will stand up. Asher lo choma, which it has a wall, and it will in permanence be the property of the new owner. Lo, which means it has a wall, is an interesting word in Hebrew. The word lo, even if you don't read Hebrew, you can follow with me right here where my cursor is. The word lo can be spelled two different ways. It can either be spelled lamed aleph, lo, or lamed vav, lo. There's no audible difference. They're pronounced exactly the same. No matter what accent you have, they're pronounced exactly the same. The difference is only in their meaning. And their meaning is starkly different. Asher lo choma, with an aleph, would mean it does not have a wall, because lo means no. I'll never forget my teachers or even my parents, whenever they want to tell me no. You know how like in English you'll say no, N-O, no, I told you no, right? So in Hebrew or in Yiddish you say lo with an aleph. Right? Because you say lo with an aleph. Don't try to misconstrue it to be the other type of lo. I'm telling you no, and it's definitely no, right? The other meaning of the word lo, which is lamed vav, that's the second one we have right here,
Yeah.
means to him, or in Hebrew, there's no such thing. There's no grammatical word as it. Everything is either him or her. So in this case, it means to it. In other words, the city, it does have a wall. So it turns out that the two ways of reading this verse are exact opposites. Either you say, if you sell a property in a city which does not have a wall, then it is sold in permanence. Or if you sell a property in a wall in a city where it has a wall, then it is in permanence. So which one has a permanent sale? Now, there's nobody that explains this according to the law with an aleph, meaning to say that it's talking about a city that does not have a wall. That would clearly be in direct contradiction to the verses we read immediately beforehand.
Right.
However, it does beg an explanation. What is going on over here? What is this business? For starters, let's talk about what does it actually say in the Torah? Right? What does it actually say in the Torah? And this doesn't happen just here. It happens very, very often. In the Torah, it says Lamed Aleph, but it's read Lamed Vav. Now, I know I see all of you scratching your head. Rabbi, I thought you just told me audibly it's exactly the same.
Right.
So very often in the Torah, we find that a word is written one way in the Torah, but it's pronounced differently. Now, this is fascinating. You know where this comes from? This comes directly from Sinai, and we're going to talk about it in just a moment. But of all of the times that it's written one way and read another way, this seems to be the most fascinating of all. It's read one way, it's spelled one way, and the reading is not only exactly the opposite, but sounds exactly the same.
Right.
Right? So let's dive into this concept. What in Hebrew is called kri and ketiv. You'll see this in your chumash all the time. Kri and ketiv. That sometimes something is read one way, but spelled another way. Okay. So text 6 comes from the Gemara, where the Gemara talks about all of these in collective. Alan, you want to read a little bit for us?
Well, yeah, Rabbi, you're saying, so this one is read with the aleph, but it's meant to be with the vav.
Correct. The meaning of it is with the vav, and
it's read as the aleph.
Not read. It's spelled as an aleph.
It's spelled as an aleph, but it's understood as the vav.
Exactly. Okay. Perfect. Exactly.
Right.
Where do these come from?
Do I start with but it? Okay. But if it is
Rabbi
not...
Yitzchak. No.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Rabbi Yitzchak said, the textual reading, as transmitted by the scribes, the stylistic embellishments, words read in the text but not written, and words written but omitted in the reading are all halacha from Moses at Mount Sinai.
Wow. So these things were almost done on purpose. Well, not almost. They were done. They were put this way on purpose by Hashem and passed down to Moses at Sinai in such a way as to be confusing. Right?
Yeah.
So, isn't that strange? I am curious. Before we move on, I'm curious how many of you have tackled this subject before. Were you familiar with this concept in the Torah? Have you seen this before?
No, never.
Well, I'm glad we're talking about it now.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, this really ties directly into the course we're going to start tomorrow, which is on this whole business with the written and oral law and how much of it comes from Sinai, and and what comes from Sinai and what doesn't, and how it works. So let's talk about it. So here's how it goes. There are commentary who take the I don't want to call it the easy way out, but they take the approach that these are errors. The Torah is very, very old, as rabbis are constantly telling us, right? It's very ancient. And over the course of time, some errors popped up here and there. Yeah. And they cross-examined, and they came to a consensus that this is the one we're going to follow, based on majority or whatever it is. But, we don't want to let go of this other one, which obviously is following some sort of tradition. So therefore, we're going to keep it just in the Torah, it's not in parentheses, but we'll keep it as kind of, this is the way it's written and this is the way it's spelled. But and we're not going to bring all these different commentary, because we're going to read them all from the Maharal of Prague. Text 7, which is quite a long text, the Maharal of Prague, the famous Rabbi Maharal of Prague, he explains that. I don't know what that sounds like. Somebody's phone. He explains to us that really taking any of these approaches would be nothing short of folly. Kalman, you want to read for us?
Yeah.
Text 7. I'm sorry, I just muted you instead of unmuting you. Go ahead. Text 7 says the Maharal.
I'll read it. Where is it in the Maharal, though? I just want to look at it afterwards?
So here, you can write it down. I skipped it here. Rabbi Yehuda Loy, Tiferet Yisrael, chapter
Okay.
66.
Okay.
Okay. So text 7, go ahead. We have already stated.
We have already stated in the previous chapter that it is not possible to amend God's Torah. It is not subject to change, addition, or subtraction, not in the words, letters, or vowels. Everything was given to Moses on Mount Sinai. The above is in contrast to some grammarians and other scholars whose tongue deserved to lick the ground and whose words should not have been written. Wow.
Talk about being harsh. Go for it.
Yeah. Some fools accepted their words as if it is a simple matter without any contention in this matter of Kri and Ksiv. Some explain the matter of Kri and Ksiv as follows. Ezra the scribe found various different versions of the Bible, so when he wasn't sure what the correct version was, he would record one version in the text and leave the other version as oral tradition.
Oh, okay. So here he says, as to an Ezra Sofer. What does the Maharal have to say about this? Sorry, I clicked instead of swiping. There we go. Go ahead. This,
I don't know how to pronounce that.
Prima facie.
Yeah,
Prima facie.
Prima facie. Go for it. Yeah.
What is that in Hebrew?
I'll look it up right now. You go ahead.
Anyway, this is prima facie absurd. For if the matter were really because of uncertainty, it wouldn't be left to mechanisms of Kri and Ksiv, but rather simply stated clearly, this word is uncertain. Others claim words that are better left unsaid, as if the prophet Jeremiah was not precise with his language.
Just to give you the exact words of the Maharal, it is v'yesh amar dvarim she'en lahotzi otam min hapeh. There are those that say
Okay.
words that I will not even say them with my mouth. You know.
Okay.
So go ahead.
Thus, the holy author was compelled to amend it orally to use appropriate language, but was afraid to actually tinker with the text that was stated with the divine spirit. One who speaks such words offends the prophets and have uttered words that no one has ever dared utter before, as if to say the prophet didn't know proper language. There really is no need to...
Yeah.
It's
very harsh.
Yeah, there really is no need to respond to such foolishness. It is clear that these people have strayed from the path of our sages, and if they knew better, etc. Wow. Yes, they were obviously bothered, but why is it necessary to have Kri and Ksiv? Anyone familiar with the wisdom knows the following. Ksiv is for the written text, as the entire purpose of writing is to record something for print. All published books are holy. By contrast, the Kri is not a book per se, rather it is what people really relay orally as they read the printed words. As such, at times the printed word appears a certain way to allude to certain deep ideas, a mechanism available only in the written word, for a book is recorded wisdom. When a person contemplates the written matter, they discover that wisdom. However, when a person casually reads the book, it is only appropriate that it be simpler language. For the deeper language is far removed from the casual reading of the average person.
Okay, 1 second. He's not done yet. Here's the end of it.
There is tradition handed. This is a tradition handed to us from Moses at Mount Sinai. What's more, at times it was necessary to add to the Kri so that people could understand it. Whereas the Ksiv, it is not necessary. For as stated, the Book of Wisdom doesn't need as much explication. Know that it is a tradition for Moses at Sinai that there be both a written and oral tradition without any degradation to either one. For when the Kri is as a person would talk to their counterpart, it is then set apart from the Ksiv, the recorded book inspired with the divine spirit.
Okay, so the Maharal, while he definitely minces no words when it comes to, telling off those who, and just to not that the Maharal needs my defense, but just to back him up here, he is talking about the fact that they're going directly against text 6. which for those who don't recall was from the Gemara, was from the Talmud, which tells us in the Dargan that Rabbi Yitzchak said that all of these are halachot Moshe Messina. They were all passed down to us. In other words, they were passed down to us from Sinai, which, might I just remind you, is where the Torah was given. It has been passed down to us since then, that this is the way it's written and this is the way it's pronounced. In other words, there's a validity to both of them. They both have have something powerful for us, right? So where are we going with this? Where we're going with this is, to simplify things, is that, look, we'll talk about the simple meaning in just a moment. We're going to go to Rashi next, just to make sure we have a simple understanding of the reading, and we're not getting too off topic over here. But what the Maharal is pointing out to us, right? The Maharal definitely had his side of the Kabbalah, that definitely came with a Kabbalistic perspective. He says, when there's a Kriyan Ktiv, there are two messages being sent here. A superficial one, I don't know if superficial is the right word, but kind of like a simpler and casual one. And then there's a deeper and more powerful lesson that we're supposed to take here. So from this one letter, and the difference in letter, we're going to get two messages, right? One letter, two messages, like one Jew, two opinions, right? And not only that, we're going to get these two messages that are going to be from different perspectives of Judaism. So from the Kabbalistic perspective, the deeper perspective, and then from the more, I guess, simplistic perspective. Okay? But before we move on, which is it? Is it with a wall or is it without a wall? Right? So for this, Rashi answers for us. Marguerite, you want to read for us? Go ahead.
As the phrase is written, it means which has no wall. Oral tradition teaches us that we read meaning to which there is, hence a city to which there is a wall. Our rabbis of blessed memory said, even if the city does not have a wall now, since it once had one, the laws of our passages still apply.
All right. There's a reason we always say that Rashi to the rescue, right? Rashi comes with crystal clear clarity. He gives us a simplistic way of looking at it. Let me explain to you what's going on over here. He says, listen, the fact is we cannot contradict the verse that was just 2 or 3 verses before. So you have to read it as low with above, which means that if it's a city that has a wall, then it does not return to its owner in the Jubilee year, and it becomes a permanent sale, and that's it. After 1 year, it becomes a permanent sale. However, why is the low also written with an aleph in order to say no? He says because the city does not have to have a wall today. It could be a city that doesn't have a wall today. The point is, at the times of Joshua, right, Yoshua bin Nun, that's when the time was. If it once upon a time had a wall, it's already in that category that has a wall, and therefore the sale is permanent. He says that's a simplistic way of looking at it. So for those among us that have gotten so confused by the whole Maharal, and we're going deeper and we're trying to understand it, we're going to get to a deeper and more powerful, because that's the agenda always of our class, get to a deeper, powerful lesson that we can take home that can change our lives from the Torah. But the simple meaning, the literal, let's not call it simple, but the literal meaning of the Torah is that any city that was surrounded by a wall from the times of Yoshua bin Nun, that's how it works. All right. So now, on to the deeper meaning. As per, we have our marching orders from the Maharal. He told us, dig deeper, low and low. There's two ways of seeing this pasuk. One way to read it, one way to pronounce it. So now you gotta let's see what there is here. Okay. So let's talk about the opening words of this week's lesson, which was the fact that we don't really own anything. Right. The whole message that the Jubilee year is supposed to be sending us is Kili Haaretz. You don't own anything. Right. These words can apply to everything in our lives, not just property. And they are nowhere more encapsulated than in the words of Shlomo HaMelech. Fishel, you want to read for us? I don't know if he can. I think his connection.
I got it.
Text 9. Up. Text 9.
Text 9. All right. Vanity of vanity. What? Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, your connection is a little.
Ecclesiastes. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity.
Havel havalim hakol havel.
Okay.
Everything in this world is vanity. Everything in this world, you think that the latest iPhone or the latest Tesla, or we think that the latest house and the most beautiful, whatever it is, right? We think that all these things mean something to us. Reminds us Shlomo Melech, Havel havalim hakol havel. Everything is nothing. Whoa. Talk about it getting hit over the head with a ton of bricks, right? Comes the Jubilee year. Once every 50 years, and it reminds us that there's a hard truth, which we like to run away from sometimes for 50 years at a time, which is I'm amassing property, I'm amassing physical wealth and physical possessions. Comes the Jubilee year once every 50 years, and what does it say? Ki li haaretz. You think you own the land, you never own land. Land belongs to Hashem. Ki li haaretz. The land belongs to me, says Hashem. So therefore, the physical possessions that you have in this world are nothing. You know, it reminds me of the story of the fellow. I might even have shared this actually at the Wine and Wisdom class. I definitely like this story. But they say the story about a man who was a patriarch of a large family, and he had also amassed quite a fortune. And he left 2 wills before he passed away. And he said, one of them is to be opened on the day that I pass away, and the other one is to be opened 30 days later at my shloshim, at the day when, 30 days afterwards, we make like a kind of a memorial. It's a Jewish tradition. After 30 days, we know that the soul ascends to a higher level. So we make a suda, we sit down, we have a meal, and we talk about the soul, etc. So sure enough, they open the first will the day he dies. Before they even bury him, they open it up, and it says, listen, I have this pair of socks. And the fellows are looking at his children are looking at this, and they say, this is ridiculous. He says, I have this pair of socks that I always liked all my life. Maybe there was like Menachem. Menachem, my son, has a pair of socks that have bananas on it. And he wears them once, every wash cycle. And it's always the first pair of socks he wears after the wash cycle. And he spends the rest of the time asking for the banana socks. And instead he's forced to wear the socks that have shoes on them, or that have, trucks on them or cars on them or whatever. In any event, this fella had a pair of socks that he liked, and he said, I want to be buried in these socks. Okay? So the children, you know how it is, the day he passed away. So his children come to the Chevra Kadisha, to the holy people or the burial society, and he says to them, our father wants to be buried in this pair of socks. Here's the pair of socks. We have them. They were included with the will and this. So the Chevra Kadisha says, listen, your father was a very God-fearing Jew. He was a Torah observant Jew. He would never want to be buried in a pair of socks. They say, look at the will. Here it is. Of course he wants to be buried in these socks. He said, but listen, according to Jewish law, every single person is buried exactly the same. Every Jewish person is buried in white, simple burial shrouds. Tachrichim, as they're called in Hebrew. I'm sorry, we can't bury him in socks. And the children are super confused. Of course, our father would never want to go against the Torah. Our father would never want to go against tradition. But at the same time, our father wants to be buried in these socks. What do we do? Finally, they decide, listen, maybe he didn't know about this law, but if he would have known about this law, certainly he would have wanted to be buried in the socks. So they decide not to bury him in the socks. All right. Fine, he's buried, there's a funeral, there's a shiva, the whole thing. 30 days later, they come to the shloshim. The whole family is sitting around. They're going to open the second will. Second will is much longer. It's got a whole bunch of pages. And on the first page, they open it up, and it says, to my dear children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and all of my sons-in-law and daughters-in-law and everybody that's part of my family. You see, after 120 years, you can't even take your socks with you. So I want you to know that for the rest of the will, the rest of my last, the living will and testament, I'm going to, leave you with all sorts of things. Don't pay that much attention to it. Or, as we just read from the words of Shlomo HaMelech, everything is vanity. Everything is naught. Everything is. We amass possessions, but what does it really do for us? Let's see how the Maharal talks about this. Stephanie, you want to read for us? Text 10.
Yes. Do not crave the table of kings, for your table is greater than their table. The wealth of Torah is greater than the wealth of kings, because the Torah is eternal. In contrast to the wealth of kings is material, subject to determination and loss.
More to this text. Hold on. In other words, the Maharal is reminding us that there is something much more important than any wealth we can amass in this world. The Mishnah tells it to us. The Talmud tells it to us. Every commentator throughout history tells it to us. They tell us, stop running this rat race. Stop looking for more things to amass and more things to be. give you more wealth or hold on, I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought because I'm setting up a light here because I know it gets dark. Stop looking for more things. Look to the Torah because that is the true thing. That is the one true thing. So whenever we think about a wall, the Torah wants us to take some time and think about what is true and what is not true. What stands the test of time and what does not stand the test of time. Arnold, you want to read for us text 11?
A residential house in a walled city. This refers to a house within a city that has been surrounded by a wall since the days of Joshua ben Nun.
So what is going on over here? The Torah wants us to remember that there is something, I apologize, we read text 11. I was going to mention this point before he mentioned text 11. I'll take it back for just a moment. The Torah wants us to remember that walls come and walls go. Walls can be lamed vav. If the city can have a wall, but walls can also be low choma. So at the same moment that this wall is standing, and it's standing powerfully, whether it's the Great Wall of China, whether it's the Berlin Wall, whether it's the walls of ancient Rome, or the walls of ancient Greece, or whatever it is, or whether it's these little walls that we build in our own lives, right? Throughout our whole lives, we're always looking for a sense of permanence. We're looking for a sense of stability. We're looking for a sense of this is me, and this is in my control, and this I'm going to hold on to, and nobody can ever take this away from me. Reminds us that Torah, stop being so busy building walls. Stop being so busy. Lo chom. All of these walls are not really walls. The only true wall we can connect to is Torah, as we're going to see in just a moment. So, the question is left, right? What is the walled city that the Torah speaks of when it says the Yovel does not cancel it out, that the Jubilee year doesn't cancel it out? Is anything guaranteed? What is the one wall which will be forever, right? Every property that we amass in our lives is always being passed on. Is always, it goes back to this one, it goes back to that one. Every 50 years it changes, so it's not really any sense of permanence. That message, I took it loud and clear. I shouldn't amass physical possessions. I shouldn't be so busy with physicality. But what is the one thing that has permanence in this world? That thing is the Torah. And that is pointed out to us directly with this exception to the rule. Which wall is the one wall which can give you a sense of permanence? It is the wall of this exception to the rule of a city that has been walled since the times of Joshua, the son of Nun. What is that wall? What is so special about those cities? And by the way, what was so special about that era? Did this ever occur to anybody? Why do we always say that if a city is walled, we have a similar law with regards to Megillah, reading the Megillah, right? That they celebrate Purim a day later. Cities that were surrounded by a wall. Why this era of Joshua, of the time of Yoshua ben Nun? I don't understand. What was so holy about that time? So Stephanie.
The time the land was divided up, I think.
That was the time the land was divided up. But why does that change any laws with regards to that time, specifically with regards to the Jubilee year? And here lies the lesson of which wall we should build in our lives. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Whenever the land of Israel is mentioned, the intent is the land conquered by the king of Israel or the prophet with the consent of the entire Jewish people. This is called the conquest of the community. If, however, the individual Jew, a family, or a tribe goes and conquers a place for themselves, even in the land given to Abraham, it is not considered as the land of Israel in the sense that one is obligated to observe all the mitzvahs there. For this reason, Joshua and his court divided the entire land of Israel into tribe portions, even though it was not conquered entirely at the time. In this way, when every tribe would exceed the conquered its portions, it would not be considered as merely an individual conquest, rather an extension of Joshua's communal conquest.
So it turns out that whenever we say the land of Israel, you know what we're talking about? We're talking about this particular era, the era of Joshua, the era of Yoshua ben Nun. When he conquered the land, That was the time. From then, there was holiness to the land of Israel, as the Rambam tells us here. This is nowhere more beautifully expressed than in this fascinating story. This is going to be a long quote from the Talmud. I'm happy to read it. Here's the full quote in Hebrew. It's from Tractate Gittin, from Masechet Gittin. It's on Daf Nun Vav. It starts on Amud Aleph on the first side of the page. It continues on the second side of the page, A and B. And it's a very long Gemara there. It's a very famous Gemara. One of the reasons this Gemara is famous, this section of the Talmud is famous, is because it's one of the only sections of Torah that we read, that we can learn on Tisha B'Av. The day when we mourn the destruction of the temple, we're not supposed to read, Torah, including Gemara, including the Talmud. But this section we're allowed to. Why? Because it actually deals with something that was going on during that era. Okay, you see here already the opening names. The emperor sent upon the people of Jerusalem Vespasian the Caesar, who came and besieged Jerusalem for 3 years. That's about as much historical background as you're going to get from the Gemara. But what is this story that Torah tells us? There were 3 men of great wealth in Jerusalem. There was Nakdime ben Gurya, Ben Kalba Savua, and Ben Tzitzit Akesas. One of them said, I will supply them with wheat and barley. A second said, I will supply them with wine, oil, and salt. The third said, I will supply them with wood. In other words, they had Israel, right? They had Israel ready. You think you're ready for a 12-month quarantine? You bought enough pasta and enough toilet paper? Right? No. Jerusalem was ready for years upon years upon years of siege. They were this was the wealthiest of the Jewish people at that time. They said, we're going to take the Jewish people on our shoulders. From the poor to the rich, they will be sustained by us. We will supply everything that you need. But there was this fraction of Jewish people that were called the Biryonim. They were a zealot band, and they were then in the city. And the rabbi said to them, let us go out and make peace with the Romans. They would not let them out. But on the contrary, they said, let us go out and fight them. The rabbi said, you will not succeed. The Biryonim then rose up and burned the stores of wheat and barley so that a famine ensued. You may have read some of the descriptions, some of the horrific, if I may add, descriptions. Literally, the only 2 places that I've seen descriptions like this are from this era and from the era of the Holocaust, of how terrible the famine was in Jerusalem during this siege. I mean, the descriptions there are horrific. I'm not even going to repeat them. A famine ensued that literally had the people of Jerusalem, begging for mercy. And Abba Sikra, who was the head of the Biryonim in Jerusalem, was the son of the sister of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who was from the rabbis. The latter sent him a message saying, come to visit me privately. When he came, he said to him, how long are you going to carry on in this way and kill all the people with starvation? So Abba Sikra replied, what can I do? If I say a word to them, they will kill me. In other words, I guess he was a man of reason, even if he was a zealot. But he said to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, what am I supposed to say? So Rabbi Yochanan said, devise some plan for me to escape. Perhaps I will be able to achieve some salvation. And one of the most famous moments of Jewish history, Abba Sikra says to him, pretend to be ill, and let everyone come to inquire about you. Bring something evil smelling and put it by you so that they will say you are dead. Let your Talmidim, let your disciples then get under your bed, but no others, so that they shall not notice that you are still light, since they know that a living being is lighter than a corpse. And he did so. And Rabbi Eliezer, who was one of the devout disciples of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, went under the coffin from one side, and Rabbi Yeshua from the other, and they carried the coffin to the entrance of the city. And when they reached the door, some men wanted to put a spear through the coffin. And he said to them, shall the Romans say they have pierced their own master? They wanted to give it a push, and he said to them, shall they say that they pushed their own master? They opened the town gate for him, and he got out. When Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai reached the Romans, he said, peace unto you, O king, peace unto you, O king. Vespasian said, I am now going and will send someone to take my place. You can, however, well, they're skipping a little part of the story where Vespasian accuses him of treachery to the Caesar because he's calling him the king when he was really only a minister. And at that moment, they came to inform him from Rome that the Caesar had died, and Vespasian became the Caesar, or the emperor. And he said to him, I'm now going. In other words, he was going to go to Rome, and I will send someone to take my place. You can, however, make a request of me, and I will grant it. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, with these famous words, not wanting to ask for too much, he knew that if he would ask for the war to end, they would never give him anything. He says to him, give me Yavne and its sages. Spare the progeny of Rabbi Gamliel and give me physicians to heal Rabbi Tzadok. Rabbi Tzadok was one of those that was horrifically ill. Some of the stories that I was telling you earlier are told of Rabbi Tzadok and how ill he was. I think one of the descriptions that's told about him is that when he would eat something during that time, you'd be able to see the food pass through his digestive system. That's how thin he was. Literally horrific. So these three things were the requests that Yochanan ben Zakkai made. All right, two of them are technical. I mean, not technical at the time; they were tremendous. Spare the progeny of Rabbi Gamliel, give me physicians to heal Rabbi Tzadok. Okay, but he also says, "Tenli Yavne v'chachameh." What was so important about the Sanhedrin? Yavne was a city where the Sanhedrin was at that time. The leaders of the Jewish people, Torah leaders, Torah scholars. What was so important about this? Text 14. Who are we holding here? Alan, go for it. Sorry, you're muted. Go ahead. Start again.
I think you got to go down a little bit. So it's not.
Oh, text 14. You see that?
Oh, it just says, Rabbi Yochanan said, the verse states, our wall, this is the Torah.
This is the wall we're looking for. This is the wall we're looking for. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai asked for one thing. He could have asked him to stop the war. He felt that would have been given to him. He could have asked for anything under the sun, and he knew the Jewish people do not need the walls, even the walls of Jerusalem, and even the walls of the Beis Hamikdash. If he cannot get that, he wants at least to have the true walls of the Jewish people, the fortified walls of the Jewish people, the walls that last forever, which is the walls of Torah. So while Rome had its eyes on the walls of Jerusalem, they surrounded the walls of Jerusalem, they climbed up on the walls of Jerusalem. Even when it came to Masada later, many years later, right, they built walls in order to get up, they built ramps, and they were so preoccupied with the physical, and where are they today, right? Walls we build, walls we tear down, those are all walls that belong to the physical and material world. But the walls of Torah, that lasts forever. Yavne, this city, with the Sanhedrin, was responsible for ensuring the survival of Judaism as it is today. By one point of anecdotal evidence, let's look at text 15, which comes from Sadia Gaon, who lived, with the hindsight of 2020, able to see the entire history from the rear view mirror. He lived, already in the times of the Gaonim, which was many years later. What does he have to say about Yavne? Marilyn, you want to read for us? Go for it.
The Jewish people have ironclad tradition that the mitzvot of the Torah are, as the prophet said, eternal. This is a clear tradition without any room for error or need for explanation. When I searched through the writings, I found proof for this. First, regarding many mitzvot, the Torah states an eternal covenant for all generations. The Torah itself states the Torah is an inheritance that Moses commanded us. What's more, our nation is only a nation by virtue of her Torah, inasmuch as God promised that the nation will endure forever like the heavens and the earth. One is compelled to say that the Torah will endure forever like the heavens and the earth.
A friend of mine, I usually prepare this lesson with a friend of mine before. He also gives the same lesson, the same teachers, and I know. He pointed out to me, he says, the terminology being used here is the walls. The walls of the material world versus the walls of Torah, and how important it is, our Torah, our tradition, and our heritage, how important that is, and how that has kept us through all these years, as opposed to pursuing physical walls. He says, in 2008, or 2007, let's say, everybody thought that there was another wall that ruled the world, right? Not the Chinese wall, not the Berlin Wall, not the Great Wall of China, Wall Street, right? And what happened in 2008? Even that wall fell, right? And today, if you tell people, oh, everything's invested in stocks, they tell you, oh, I don't know who's the next Bernie Madoff, I don't know when the next economic collapse is. Even that is not permanent anymore, right? It used to be, at that time, I watched a documentary once about Bernie Madoff and the people who were invested with him, and they thought this was a wall. This was a sense of permanence. This was a real estate, right? This was something that was real, that was permanent, it was my wall. This I'm going to have forever, right? And with one knack, the Eibishter sent, Hashem sent not one, but many different, elements that together caused the collapse of 2008, and boom, down went Wall Street. And down went, unfortunately, many people's economic stability, right? So if there's one lesson that we're looking to take from this week's Torah, if there's one lesson that we're looking to take from the fact that the word lo, when it comes to choma, when the word fortified wall is used in the Torah says, yes, of course, in order to explain to you the law, it has to be positive. But I want to remind you, I want to tell you that whenever we're talking about a wall, lo choma, it's not a wall. It's not a true wall, and it will not stand the test of time unless it is the spiritual wall, choma zu Torah. Like Rabbi Yochanan said, that the walls of Torah, that is the most important thing. And as Maimonides famously said, and we'll ask Alan to bring us home with these words, that no matter what it is, the Torah will always be there with us. This is from the Rambam, who talks in his famous Igeres HaTeman, in his letter to the Yemenite Jews. This is what he tells them.
God already promised our forefather Jacob that through the nations of the world will subdue, oppress, and overpower his descendants. They will nevertheless endure, their oppressors eventually fading away. As the verses state, and you and your seed will be as the dust of the earth. Though they will be as the dust that everyone treads upon, eventually they will overpower and triumph over them all, just as the earth eventually buries all those who tread upon it, enduring for eternity while those buried underneath it not so. God promised us through his prophets that we will never be exterminated, never cease to be his treasured nation, just as God himself cannot cease to exist. So it is with the Jews, as it is stated, I, God, do not change, and you, the children of Jacob, I can't see the rest.
Will never be
Will
exterminated.
never be exterminated.
Okay, good.
As we say in the Haggadah, as we just said in the Haggadah, Vehi she'amda lavoseinu v'lanu. The Torah is what stood by our Jewish people, the Jewish people, for a time immemorial. Shelo echad bilvad, and not just one, and not just nations, I will add, have stood up to try and destroy us. Sometimes it's assimilation, and sometimes it's physical abundance, sometimes it's materialistic desires, materialistic pursuits. But all of them, all of these walls that we build, even your socks you can't take with you, right? All of these walls that we build will eventually crumble. Which wall stands the test of time? What does the Torah tell us? The walls of Yoshua bin Nun. What is special about walls in the times of Yoshua bin Nun? You know what it is? Kedusha, holiness. Yoshua bin Nun is the one who established the land of Israel as a holy land, we are a holy nation in a holy land with a holy Torah. That holiness, that's what kept us throughout these years. That Torah, that tradition, that rich connection to Hashem, that is what has stood the test of time and will always stand the test of time. That Choma Zu Torah, that wall which is Torah, is stronger than the walls of Berlin, the walls of Rome, the walls of Wall Street, the walls of any walls you could think of put together. So l'chaim, l'chaim. Let's end off with a strong resolution to connect to Hashem and His Torah. I don't need to tell this to you guys. Everybody that's here at this class knows, and you guys come every Wednesday to share in Torah, but maybe take another night a week to join us to learn Torah, because this Torah, this is what will get us through this last, upheaval of the world, and will eventually bring us to the land of Israel with Mashiach. May it be speedily in our days.
Amen.
L'chaim.
Out of curiosity, like you